I'm pretty sure if you've watched any horror movie, preferably the campy titles, you would have come across a scene where a character makes a really absent-minded decision, which generally leads them to their demise. And the only thing you can think of at that point is, why the fuck did they do that? Now, there is an acceptable reasoning behind that action. You can't have a horror piece of media without questionable judgments. That's what drives the plot of such stories. They make or take a faulty route and end up in a terrible situation that they can't get out of. Well, the problem with using the said mechanics in such way is that there is a difference between results that have bad sides to them and are reasonable with context and plain and simple mistakes. Some choices are made without any thought being put into them. And that's what incites that irritating feeling of emotionally face palming without physically performing it because the characters keep doing it until the runtime runs out. With all this being said, you can't simply take away that factor from horror films. Tragedy, sadness, and dreadfulness are the cornerstone of this genre. It's a love-hate relationship that is required for it to function properly. Without it, the charm of horror would start to diminish, and we would be left with a shallow shell of its former self. The mishaps shapes the structure of it, no matter how foolishly they are used. And this is where the gaming side of it comes to play. In video games, we are allowed to control almost every aspect of the playable character, which sounds like a blessing in horror games. However, that's not the case, even though this is the format where horror should shine, as the emotions that are a byproduct of it tend to work the best when experienced personally. Hence, we vividly remember those terrifying instances that we came across when we were young that couldn't be logically explained at that exact moment. Those memories will forever be etched in our minds. But that doesn't seem to work in horror-based video games. It doesn't matter if you watch a playthrough or a stream or play it for yourself. Most horror titles hardly provide anything of substantial quality. There are various reasons behind it as to why it's like that. The formidable one can be the successful formula set by popular franchises working as a creative blockade for developers from really trying to experiment with their work. Which is why we are in a constant cycle of similar releases year after year. There's survival horror with mindless mechanics, one-dimensional cul-de-sac core gameplay that are a massive bore fest. Glorified walking and opening drawers simulators sold as a psychological experience. But the horror is created by stripping you from various fundamental physical attributes that feels cheap and fabricated. Even in the indie scene, we are bombarded with VHS stylized, retro-inspired, over-romanticizing about the past by triggering a nostalgia receptor sort of games that all look and play out identical to each other. And how can I forget about those jump scares galore, overusing the easiest and cheesiest trope to sell same in the name of a game, which is the biggest cop-out in the name of a artistic endeavor that somehow keeps fooling people. The velocity of trends refers the pace of what games we are handed with, making them competitively and creatively opaque. For example, currently we are in the brain rot of liminal space horror, all thanks to the online AR series of Backrooms to introduce that concept to the masses, who somehow managed to ruin the entire appeal of it. Nothingness was the fear factor of it, not goofy monstrous beings. Don't worry, this madman rant had a purpose. The reason I laid all these examples was not only to showcase the mediocrity of these modern titles, but to shine a light onto an aspect that is prevalent in all of them: their first-person perspective, which, as I've said in the past, is the cheapest viewpoint to be used in horror to harness a scare, limiting the view so they can place an audio-visual cascade that we call a jump scare. There are horror games who have really well thought out concepts and ideas, but none of them come close to the title chosen here to be showcased. and how its subtle change in camera angle leads to mind-blowing results. Darkwood is an atmosphere-heavy, psychologically haunting survival horror game developed and published by Acid Wizard Studio, getting a fully fledged release in the year of 2017 after 4 years of development that was crowdfunded, taking inspiration from the works of David Lynch amongst others, Slavic folklore which provided the setting and timeline for it, and resembling visual themes that can be associated with Lovecraftian anomalies. The tagline proclaims this quote: "Darkwood provides a new perspective on survival horror," as that's the biggest selling point of this game, and how it was marketed to potential players. And it does a great job in selling that point pretty quickly with the prologue, improving on various survival aspects that seems to be lacking or feel lackluster in other competing titles, with sensible storage that can be upgraded, as that would be the priority of anyone when placed in that situation. And it induces the action of hoarding, as even the most useless item would seem better when it's in your inventory and not other surviving strangers. It doesn't stop there, as it captures a certain psychological element with relative ease: the feeling of distrust. After 10 to 15 minutes, the game switches the character we get to control in a quick succession after you're done looking and looting for items, thinking this is our protagonist who we have to help in order to endure the severe surroundings that they are stranded in. What we are seeing is the birth of trust issues, which is a great tool that is widely used in horror. Darkwood hardly relies on jump scares to tense up the player. Rather than that, it takes advantage of the moody and gloomy atmospheric environment with its dark and desolate forest backdrop to keep them on their toes, and with its methodical and realistic approach towards every activity. Opening your backpack takes time, which increases your chances to be attacked. Performing any operation momentarily hinders your ability to look in every direction, turning any mundane scene into an incredibly deadly encounter, requiring your undivided attention for your survival's sake, where it stresses you while picking up items even in a deserted location. Visually, the influences starts to seep out. The engulfing grey tone and its darkness are impeccably utilized to create a sense of suspense at any given moment, which is heightened by its incredible sound design. The game doesn't take much time to lay out the harshness of its plague-ravaging lands, entrapping helpless and hopeless individuals who are barely managing to keep in touch with their reality. Dead bodies are spread across the edges of its remaining accessible terrain, who perished while trying to find a way out, not realizing that there is no end, just more endless and ever-growing debilitating forest, more surviving, more scouring for resources, more death in the hopes of staying alive. All of this is bound to take a huge mental toll on any living organism, not to mention the blights that is transforming any breathing being into aggressive abominations. This is made apparent by our maiden controllable character, a delusional doctor who thinks he is helping the locals, always on the look for supplies, and is hell-bent on finding an escape from that dreadful place, even taking the stranger in a hostage situation, whom we later on control to traverse the semi-open world of this game. And this is where we can easily experience the magic of its perspective. Previously mentioned attributes complement this point of view, and independently, those facets work superbly. However, this is the undeniable mammoth in terms of quality that Darkwood has to offer. This particular top-down framing is mainly used in certain type of games that grants the player with a tactical point of vantage, allowing the interaction to be more strategic and not a run and gun sort of scenario, offering us with the entire image to critically evaluate any given situation before heading in. On paper and in different titles, this approach mostly works in the favor of the player, an advantage over the unsuspecting AI. And Darkwood uses this to give the player a false sense of security. With your limited angled vision, you can't focus in all directions at once, being left to only visualize the stationary landscape, which is very true to real life. Yes, you can't see what's behind you, but you can easily imagine how everything is placed. Let it be the streets leading to your house, and the place where you reside, or the room that you're currently in. The layout of it is crystal clear in your mind. However, you wouldn't know if someone was standing behind you. Do yourself a favor and don't look backwards. And this exact feeling is the brilliance of Darkwood's horror, and it's all thanks to its perspective, which is intensified by its convincing sound design, where the slightest noise of sticks cracking is more than enough to startle you. Anything that you can only hear and not see simply amplifies the tension, and it takes advantage of your nervousness, purposely feeding on it, as nothing is scarier than what our imagination can conjure out of nothing to scare itself. And the naturalistic lighting and how it works in accordance to its surrounding plays a huge role in how the game takes away that edge we think we'll get from its tactical perspective. Strands of light escapes from the cracks on the wall, giving you a slight glimpse of the unknown entities lurking in the dark. Areas populated with tall trees dims the visibility until you get hold of a light source. These minute components is what accentuates Darkwood's framing to such a height that it creates a unique little hemisphere for itself in the ever-competitive market of video games, as it is nothing but full of insane and intricate details that can make anyone appreciate horror in this gaming medium. An assemblage of the best ingredients that the genre has to offer, and a feat of pure passion and determined drive from the developers to impart us with such a stellar quality of horrifying experience that will take some effort to be outdone, if ever in the future.